Good evening, everybody. My name is Alex. I'm the moderator for tonight. I'm the head of events and one of the board members at the Bangkok Startup Association. My day-to-day job is that I manage a investment fund. We focus on early stage startups, and I also sit as advisor and interim fractional C-suite for a number of them. The topic for tonight is how to hire, what to hire, why to hire, how to fire, and all the subjects in between, what it means to build an early stage team. As an investor and someone who works with startups from a pre-seed to seed to Series A, I can attest to this being one of the most crucial decision-making processes that founders need to learn. Something that I think we often take kind of for granted, but just need to find the right people for the right job. That statement is a lot further from the actual practice. So for this subject, I have invited Billy. And Billy is not just a random person I found off the street. Billy is also the president of the Bangkok Startup Association. And he's also a founder for Startup Breed, which is a specialized recruiting agency helping both early stage startups and scale-ups recruit the right teams and build the right structures around what it means to have an early stage team. So welcome everybody, and welcome Billy. It's very nice to see you. I haven't actually seen you for a while. Been quite excited to talk to you about this.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me, Alex.
Of course, of course. And for everyone here, thank you very much for joining. Of course, these are the webinars we do for free. We try to do them once a month, twice a month if we can. We kindly invite you to ask questions runningly in the chat. I will make sure to keep an eye on it. And towards the end of this webinar, we open up the floor if you want to share something more directly. But the way we do this usually is that we carry on the webinar for a good 20 to 30 minutes, where we explore a number of subjects related to this topic. And then if you have questions as we do this, please feel free to share it in the chat. And then towards the end, we'll invite you to the stage. But to start off with, Billy, I'd like to kind of get an idea of what the topic of startup hiring actually means, because I think it's a buzzword to some degree. So maybe you can help us with a definition of what does startup hiring mean to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, hiring is the same thing in any kind of company. What is a company at the end of the day, right? The company is a group of people that are driving together towards a certain mission. But the thing is, in many corporates, it would be much more about keeping the wheel spinning. Whereas in startups, you have to build, you have to create. And for that, you need a completely different kind of talent than what you need in corporates. Hence, we call it the startup breed, the special breed of talent that has a bit of more these entrepreneurial attributes, if you will.
So you address the case of a founder, you address the case of an early stage company. When you talk early stage and we talk specifically about making your first hires, tell me about this type of company. What kind of company are we talking about that deals with early stage hiring?
What do you mean? What kind of company deals with early stage hiring?
Like what is the stage? What would you say is the stage that the companies that you experience with are in order to engage with early stage hiring?
Right. It really depends. I mean, some of the startups that we work with are very early stage. It is literally two co-founders that just raised the angel investment and they're looking for the very first technical hire, all the way to startups that raise a Series D that are now preparing for IPOs and need a little bit more specialist almost. And then everything in between, from seed to Series A, B, C, D, you can name it.
Okay. So I want to start from the beginning because when we deal with pre-seed, and for those who are not aware of a pre-seed startup, we're talking about a company that has some kind of proof of revenue. They have an indication of where they want to grow. They're usually single, maybe dual founders. They might have a single freelancer, but we're not really talking about it at a larger scale than that. And now they are realizing that the burden of work is a little larger. What happens next, Billy? Like what are the types of early stage hires that you experience these companies going through?
Right. again, it kind of depends. Like on one side, it's exactly the case what you just mentioned. The company is growing, the company is scaling, and all of a sudden there's too much to do with too little hands. The other situation is if you go to the very early stage, like let's say there are two co-founders, but both more operationally or commercially inclined, but it is a tech company. All of a sudden, they need a third co-founder. They need the CTO kind of hire. So we have worked on these cases, but also as you say, like I mean, Living Roots is a great example. They're doing fantastic, they're scaling, they are growing, and there are just too many opportunities for the current team to tackle. So they're like, all right, time for a good sales hire, and that's where we come in.
Good, good. And for those unaware, Living Roots is one of my portfolio companies I've engaged with Billy with. He helped us set up the offer sales manager, which is obviously a key role when it comes to scaling up your revenue stream, but also a very critical position because, you know, what does it mean to hire someone that now supposed to sell the product that the founder knows better than anyone? So from my experience, I see an early founder here know how to do something very, very well, maybe even being a little protective about it because, you know, they want their product to be perfect. What happens in this case, Billy? Like, what happens with a founder that has to hand over kind of the first task to a new employee? Is that an easy experience? Do you experience that?
It depends on the kind of founder. Some founders are incredibly happy that they can hand it over and that they can be almost a little bit more hands-off on certain facets of the business and transition from working in the business to working on the business. But other founders, they feel like they're giving away the baby and they're very protective of it and they almost micromanage a little bit too much in the beginning before someone has proven themselves and then slowly let go.
Okay, so give me that directly then. What is the, excuse my French here, everybody, but where's the fuck ups when it comes to early stage hiring, often for founders? Because what are the things that you shouldn't do when it comes to hiring in the early stage company?
One of the biggest mistakes that I see is number one, clarity. They're not really sure of what they're looking for and why they're making that hire. But secondly, they tend to be on either side of the extremes when it comes to hiring speed. Either they want someone immediately, they have one brief chat for 30 minutes, yeah, offer, let's go. Or they do the other extreme. They want to go to 10 rounds, 3 case studies, I don't know how many kind of meetings to go to the same cycle to then still remain indecisive and say like, oh, we need more candidates for comparison's sake. And I think the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
So being clear enough what you need, have a solid process mapped out on how to actually assess them. But then if you have the right one, then also move forward.
Do you experience that founders mess up this gut feeling that they try to data drive the hiring process early on and they just can't reach a point where they can agree?
Yeah, happens sometimes, but that's an interesting discussion in general. How do you make hiring decisions? And do you take gut feel into account? And I would always make an argument that in this very early stage of your startup, you may even want to listen a bit more to your gut feel, because at the very least, this is one of the people that you're going to be spending more time with than your wife or your closest friends. So you kind of want to make sure that you get along and you vibe well with the person, regardless of competencies, experience, and everything else that comes on top of it.
Yeah. So a case that I experienced, we had one of my when I had my startup back in the days, we had acquired a subsidiary to help us with graphic design. This was a graphics company. It came with about 20 employees, and we needed a kind of a MD to run it. Now, this was not my first time hiring, but this was definitely my first time hiring someone of a more executive role. And the cases we made and the value and the vibe we got from this person was very good. But it proved very quickly, even though she had a nice package, it proved very quickly that she wasn't capable of carrying out the job, right? And from my experience, it was very hard for me to, I mean, I might have trusted my gut a little too much and not had understood the type of case I should perhaps have done for this role. Is that something, am I an outlier or am I an average founder in that position?
I mean, the thing is, we try to protect founders for it. Like, if the interview process is too long, we give hard pushback on it. Like, hey, you're going to lose the tier A talent because they don't have time or interest to go through this full process you have set out. But same on the other side of the extreme. If you are only having a few interviews and a few chats and then making decisions based on how one portrays themselves and what kind of gut feel you get with it. It's also not good enough. Somewhere in this process, you must have somewhat of a skill assessment. Skill assessment in the sense of what are they actually doing in the job? Let's use, for example, how I do it internally. When I'm hiring new recruitment consultants, when they come in to do the case study, they are going to the recruitment cycle. They have to do a research step, they have to do some sourcing, they have to do some phone screening and dealing with with clients in a variety of situations. And then I can see how will they actually perform when they start doing the job. You do not want to find this out in day number one. You want to find this out through the application process. So in your particular case, you're hiring a managing director, which is an immense job scope. But then again, like, what are the biggest problems that you want this person to target within the next 30 days, 90 days, and 1 year? Or in other words, what are the goals that you have for them on these different timelines? And then how can you test this out doing a case study if somebody gets it and has this ability to execute on it, right?
Mm. You mentioned A player, and I want to address Steven's question in the chat as well, which is there a pattern of which roles are filled earlier and which are filled later? I would say this was definitely a later role, but I was hiring for an A talent. How would I even approach this idea of finding an A talent versus a B or C talent? Because like an A talent might be someone who thinks more strategically than a C talent. Or am I messing up terms here?
Yeah, I mean, A plus player, it is like, I often like a sports metaphor. Think about it, right? If you have in football, you have Ronaldo or Messi, these are going to run circles around whole teams of B or C players, like just if you have few of these key players. And the same thing applies to a startup. You want the very best that the market has to offer. But then the question comes in, why would they join your startup, right? And how can you actually assess if it is a plus player or a B or C or D or whatever?
Okay, so it sounds a little like the addressment of an A player is a job description where I don't necessarily need to know the. I shouldn't perhaps focus too much on the day to day, but I should focus more on the 365 days. And a B and C talent is more addressed towards the specific tasks rather than the long-term view. Is that a right way of seeing it?
I don't think that's necessarily the case, because even in the junior roles, let's say you have a sales executive or junior software engineer, you still have big differences in the kind of level that someone comes in at. And the A players, they overachieve on everything. Think about it in an academic setting. Those are the ones that have the near perfect GPA and hitting the marks every single time. Same thing in a business. And sometimes you have bit of talents that really get it, execute slow, never get to the results that you want, never hit the KPIs, and are just not really driving the business forward. And especially in a startup, you have no place or time for B or C tier kind of talent.
Okay. Does this? I mean, like, obviously this depends on the startup type, but I deal with SaaS, I deal with tech, I deal with AI, I deal with some real estate, prop tech startups. Are there any differences to where A talent plays a bigger role from your experience in specific startup types? Like, are tech heavy more keen than B2C, or?
No, not necessarily. I mean, in some industries, it's more difficult than others. We serve across all industries. We're industry agnostic. We're dealing a lot, obviously, with AI, prop tech, HR tech, insurtech, fintech, you possibly name it. But we also deal with industries like healthcare. And when we look for candidates with relevant industry experience, they tend to be a little bit more corporate leaning rather than startup leaning. So in these older, outdated industries, it's much more difficult to find this entrepreneurial, fast-paced kind of talent. Whereas if you're in an industry where startups have been big in the past 10 years, let's say fintech, it may become a little bit easier.
Okay. I think I need an example of this, right? So if you were to address the best scaling companies that you've hired for, what made these talent work? Just so I understand. Like
one company that I can use as example is a company called Soma Health. Soma Health is a regenerative healthcare leader here in Bangkok. They started out 2 years ago with one medical clinic specializing in stem cells, peptides, and all these kind of things. But fairly shortly thereafter, they opened up Vietnam, they opened up Malaysia. They entered in a joint venture with a company called Cell Collapse out of Sweden, where they basically building a manufacturing facility in Thailand, and a confidential joint venture that is going to be announced very soon. So what I'm trying to say is they had so many developments going on, but the team was incredibly small, especially when it came to the commercial team. And the CEO needed some good right-hand man or right-hand woman to run alongside him that they can tell like, hey, this is the goal, this is the main strategy, now go run with it, go get it done. And as I mentioned, in healthcare, it's quite difficult to find entrepreneurial talent. But lo and behold, we had one of these magical women, her name is Lynn, and and she had the right background. She understands the healthcare industry. She had been part of one of these regenerative healthcare clinics that she had to help to go from zero to quite a high level. And she had this entrepreneurial attitude. She has this sense of ownership, the one that thrives in chaos and loves running with these projects, executing it and getting results. So that's one of these key hires that made a significant difference. But then within 2025, I think we placed maybe 25-ish different candidates over there on a variety of departments and within different companies within the Soma Health umbrella.
Okay. But there's something here that I don't get, because it sounds like that the founder had to understand that they had to hire for a specific type of talent that would release their, or maybe support, give them more brain power, give them more space. Is that something you say is that something a founder needs to learn, or does that come naturally? Or because that sounds like a founder that's open-minded enough to understand that the burden is too much for them to carry, and they need an intellectual employee, high talent to kind of carry this. Like is that a natural way for founder to think?
I mean, definitely not all founders, but this founder was also experienced business guy. He has been in the family business. He has seen numerous of these cycles, and he has a tremendous board of advisors around him that can point him in the right direction. And what I think is incredibly interesting about this company is that how he is currently hiring is not caring about the background at all. He very much hires for attitude, sense of ownership, learning ability, and these kind of things, and simple things like first principle thinking, rather than what have you sold in the past or what did you do exactly. Of course, he wants to see something that shows high achiever, but doesn't care too much where it is in.
Okay. So I think with that's a big question mark for me, because you can be dealing with a very high technical founder who might not have I'm not going to call it not enough an open mind, but not enough broadness in his understanding of what type of person is needed for my company to scale in this regard. So if a founder doesn't know what they don't know, how will they hire right?
Yeah, it starts with clarity. It starts with a whole lot of clarity. And this is when we do intake with clients. We would first understand a little bit like, hey, where's the company at? Where have you been? What is the history? What is the mission? What is the vision? What are the values? What's your company culture like? Get all the understanding of, hey, what fits your company and what are you working towards on the grand scale of things and where are you today? And then how does this talent help you get there? And similar to what I asked earlier, what are the short-term goals, mid-term goals, long-term goals? And then we reflect on, okay, is this indeed the right person that can help you to these goals? Do we have the right title, the right job description, the right kind of budget in mind? Or do we have to make some tweaks here and there? And then we have this consultative kind of approach to get to the right situation. But even then, we start presenting candidates, right? And often when you start interviewing, especially if it is the very first hire, you may come to some realizations as you're speaking to candidates like, oh, actually, we may have to make some tweaks over there. Maybe we have to go a bit more senior, or maybe we concluded, okay, the seniors are managing too much. We need very much an individual contributor. So maybe we have to go one rank lower. These kind of tweaks we make along the way.
Okay. So there is definitely a softer side to the hiring process that goes before the candidate. And that is, what is the organization? What is the goal? What is the culture, et cetera, et cetera. I know time is always flying, so I want to ask you for another case. Give me a case for a company that hired where it didn't work, as in the exact opposite, where the hiring went wrong. and maybe it didn't fail the company, but things went wrong?
Because of the sensitivity, let me not use any specific names,
Yes.
but let's call it Company X. Company X was very convinced that they needed someone with lots of relevant experience. So rather than looking for a startup profile, they wanted someone who had done the leadership of one of these big corporates that is in the same field. And does this person understand the industry? Most definitely. But can this person be an individual contributor, lead an incredibly small team, and deal with limited budgets? And that's where the issues came in very quickly after the person started. And then they still wanted to keep going because, well, they didn't want to fire as quickly as I thought they should. And then after a few months, the results were still not there. And then the candidate resigned himself. And well,
Okay.
that was the end of it. And we go to the replacement cycle. But they lost months, they lost runway, and they didn't get where they needed to get to.
Okay. Interesting. So I want to dive a little into the interview process as well here, because I think there's definitely some of that risk that can be mitigated if you interview correctly. And I've sat at a lot of interviews now. When it comes to a minimal viable interview structure for, say, a 10-person startup, what would you say are the absolute necessities in order to structure that in the right way?
Number one, first interview with the hiring manager directly, the person that they're going to be working with the closest, and perhaps one of the peers. And that's more of an introduction interview where you get to know the candidate, the past experience, a bit of the skills, motivations. You have some preliminary thoughts on the culture fit. And again, you sell the vision of what you are building and see if they are excited about it. And ideally, you want to ask for specifics. Candidates that cannot go into specifics are always a little bit of a red flag. If you can't explain how you did something or what kind of results you got out of it, I'm assuming you didn't really do it. But then second step is more the skill assessment. So where you would invite them ideally for an offline case study. And then it comes down to what is the actual job. In recruitment, we mimic the recruitment cycle. As a sales manager, okay, what is your sales strategy? Who are you targeting? How are you targeting them? And let's say cold calling is part of it. Let's mimic one of these cold calls. And now, okay, do a pitch and handle some of the objections and see how they go through it and see if it could be a match. Other sides, if it is, for example, a marketing person, then okay, critique the current website and social media efforts. Then these are our targets. How would you get there? What strategies, what tactics, what budget? Come up with a plan, present it, and then be challenged and see how they respond when challenged. Whereas for tech person, CTO, okay, do some system architecture and then some live coding with somebody that knows what they're looking at.
It's funny
then,
because, oh, sorry,
yes,
go ahead.
No, please.
No, because it sounds like part of this interview practice is actually using the interview candidate as a potential consultant and present them with the biggest challenges, the biggest opportunities, the status quo of the business. Actually not overcomplicate the process, but get as close to how the business is today for them to see how things could work.
100%. Mimic as much of the real situation as you can. And almost the way that I position my own case studies is like, hey, imagine this is day number one. You are training and you want to do the best possible job. I also, especially for junior hiring, what I do sometimes internally is they think that it is almost a bit like an exam or whatever, where they have to do it and then hand it in. Whereas I like it to be a collaborative process so that I can also see, hey, how would I work together with this candidate? Do they ask the right questions in the right way? Do they understand my answers and can they take actions upon it? So the moment you mimic as much of the real work environment as possible, you get the closest to the real skill assessment.
Okay. So far I've collected a few kind of golden points for the founder, and I'm going to actually use this for my own founders. It's one of them is understand the soft values of your company. It is also when you go into an interview process, the best way of mimicking risk of miscompatibility with the candidate is that you understand your problems, you understand your opportunities of the company, and you can convey this in a convincing manner to the candidate so they can see how the status quo of the company is. And the third is that you, I guess, take in some of the right interview practices in this. I just want to ask on that third point, what would you say is the most underrated interview practice?
One of the most underrated one is to actually sell your company and the opportunity as well. Very often they think like, oh, I am interviewing, I am judging the candidate, and that's it. But they often forget that especially A players, they have choices and they are judging you as well. And they're thinking, am I going to join this company? Am I excited to work with this person? So you do want to spend a little bit of time selling the opportunity, selling the vision. But again, there I've seen big mistakes as well. Sometimes they oversell it and almost create a bit of a too beautiful situation that's not close to the reality. And we do this during our screening. It's like, hey, you are talking about a fast-paced startup. It is complete and utter chaos. There is no structure yet. You're going to be building from scratch. You have to be focused on the solutions. You have to get results. There are no resources. It's you doing all of that. Is this something you would get excited about? And if the answer is no, then it's like, hey, this is not going to be for you. That's not the journey that we are discussing.
So be able to sell, but not oversell.
Sell, but undersell, yeah, not oversell.
Yeah, undersell.
Yep.
So,
Make them excited about the vision, about the mission, about what the company is doing, but don't create a situation that's far from reality. Be real about how scrappy you are and that there is no budget and no people to help out and that you're relying on this person to get these results independently, which is, fair enough for a startup, but don't lie about it.
so this is interesting because, as I think any founder needs to be able to pitch. If you are to be running a company, you should be able to convey your company in a compelling manner. So that's a good spillover of your abilities into the interview process.
Right.
Quickly, so we have the other side of the coin. What is the most overrated interview practice?
Maybe, and I'm guilty of this. I do this myself, but sometimes people read too much into certain answers. Like they have one particular case question, and if somebody can't solve it, yeah, rejected. They don't get it. Whereas I think you have to be zooming out and judging the situation as a whole rather than getting married to certain questions and answers. You saw Google doing this in the past as well, right? Where they ask these consulting like questions. How many ping pong balls can you fit into an airplane? Or these kind of things, which is great if you need somebody that has this rational, logical thinking, first principle thinking. Okay, how big is the space? How big is a ping pong ball? Is it full? Is it, but for many of the positions, it's super relevant, yet founders are here rejection reasons can't answer that question. And we're talking about a salesperson that is only pitching, 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 pitching. But because they can't answer a logical case question, you're not hiring them. It's like, are we assessing the right skills here?
So it sounds like be holistic about the interview process. Don't be too narrow in whether or not they understand one thing or can answer one thing. That's cool. That's cool. So now you found your candidate. You're great. You're a founder. You can pitch your problem. The candidate is excited. It's definitely it feels like it's the right hire. When do you give shares? How does ESOP play a role for hiring here? Because one of the things that I've realized is it's a particular type of person who finds equity in a startup valuable, but it ties them very deeply into the role and actually makes them a long-term player. But once you give equity, it's kind of like you're married to them, right? So what is your experience about giving out equity rather than cash, or maybe less cash? When does it work? When is it noise?
I mean, number one, most of the startups, they're equity rich, cash poor. So you want to lean towards somewhat of equity compensation. And it gives them skin in the game, right? It gives them real ownership of the company that they are helping build. Problem is, however, we haven't seen that many success cases in Thailand. How many friends do you know that made, let's say, millions of Thai baht out of the equity they got from the startup employment?
Yeah.
Not that many here in Thailand. There are a handful, there are a few, but mostly it's on the founders that sold the business. But these businesses that being sold a few years ago, they didn't have these ESOP programs. So we're yet to see many of those successes that people also get a bit more educated about it. But in general, I would say you want to get your leaders on the ESOP plan. You want to make sure that they fully get and appreciate what they get out of it. Otherwise, do not give it to them. And then standard practice is 1 year cliff, 4 year vesting schedule. And what that basically means is that for the first year of employment, they don't get any equity until the 1 year has been completed. then they get the first 25%. So let's say there are 100 shares, they get 25 at that point in time. After that, it vests monthly. So basically, the other 75 shares divided by 36, so they get 2 point something every single month on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's a critical decision that I think many founders underestimate it as a tool, but some of people also don't think about the impact of who it is that's supposed to receive this, right? So
Yep.
putting a little bit of thought into how you divide your ESOP and equity goes a very a long way with the right hire.
Yep.
So now this is interesting because now I think we've covered from, what does it mean to hire first, to how you hire, to why you hire, to what to give. I want to spend the last 6 minutes before we open the floor on a subject that has come up that I believe is absolutely crucial to hiring, because it changes teams. And that is the usage of agentic AI in startups. And most of my fast scaling startups, they have used agentic AI to significantly alter the composition of their team. And I want to ask your advice on this, right? Because I'll share some of the data I've found. So a recent McKinsey report showed that 120% engineering team can cut down to 25, and that we are looking at a significant cut in what developers' roles are when it comes to, for example, coding your tech software up to speed. So how do you see the interplay between agentic solutions and hiring processes play a role for future startups? And I'll tell you what we do now in 2 different startups. That is, we hire an engineer. This engineer might be paid, $80,000 a year. We expect that engineer to use an equal amount in tokens on their development, because if we can't match their rate of development in coded tokens, we are missing out on what I believe is a big gap in development power. So how do you see this compilation of saying I need to hire, or should I start looking at an agentic solution? What do you think that's going to do for recruiting for startups?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's not necessarily replacing people immediately, but simply the hiring criteria change. You get so much more productive if you're using the AI tools. So, for example, nowadays, if we look for a mid-level software engineer, typically it would maybe be 1 mid-level supported by 2 juniors. Now these 2 juniors are being replaced with AI, but then we do need to make sure that, number one, this mid-level person knows how to use the AI tools and stays on top of it. And number two, also really knows how to write clean code. And I think Arc Fusion has done a great job in getting quality talent and also assessing them in the right way.
Can you tell people what Arc Fusion is real quick?
Yes, most definitely. So Arc Fusion is a Gen AI software house that both delivers enterprise-ready production as well as has their own internal products that they're commercializing. So they focus everything on Gen AI. And what they do in the interview process, once candidate move to the case studies, is that they are assessing both of these skills. They say like, okay, there's one part that is coding where it's going to be expected to use AI tools. And then another part, we're going to do a whiteboard session where we dive deeper into the architecture, the system thinking, and so forth. So they're testing both like, okay, does somebody have the wits and can they do it without the AI tools? Great. Okay, but then now let's use the AI tools. How productive and effective can they get with it?
Okay. So this is an interesting point. I just want to open up on that a little bit, because it sounds like the ratio between specialists and generalists is changing. It sounds like you need more generalists and less specialists.
Again, it really depends, but I don't think that's necessarily true, because think about it, right? Your salesperson still needs to do sales, but just enhanced with AI. A lot of the junior tasks or the admin tasks, I believe, are becoming obsolete on the short term. In the mid to long term, again, this is going to change significantly. People will have full-blown AI employees. But as of now, I think it's better to empower the mid-level staff and cut out the junior layer.
Okay. So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that the startup, when it comes to the mid-layer operation hires, such as interim at the COO level, needs to focus more on how to not outsource, but incorporate AI as a complement to their hiring. So like if I want to hire a interim admin, that interim admin also has to have a significant amount of experience in AI for them to, streamline midsection of my company.
For sure, for sure. And even think about it for recruitment. Recruitment, very people-driven kind of job. But for example, in the research phase, where you're trying to understand what is the company, what is the position, and so forth, instead of my recruiters doing all manual research, I would love for them to use AI. And if I see during the case study that somebody is not using it effectively or doesn't know the basics about prompt engineering, it's immediately a red flag for me in the current time. And I would prefer someone that has a bit more wits about it.
Okay. So already in your advisory to startups, you have incorporated that the founder should consider a set of AI generalist awareness across their hiring. So if I want to hire someone new, make sure to incorporate a subject in the interview process where you can explore AI tools.
Yes, I think for some it is more important than for others. For example, IBM Momo Sales Manager could be a nice to have, but I don't think it is as important. Whereas for a software engineer or marketeer or whatever in the current climate, it's crucial. If you don't have it, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, because what I see at least is that coding can be done a lot easier now with Claude Code, right? And
Right.
you have development agents that can work day and night. The CTO's role is still very important. The senior dev role is very important, but junior devs, doesn't seem to be the highest need for them anymore. And
Yep.
if you stretch that development line over, 2 or 3 years, have a good agent, right? And then you can
Yeah.
develop anything you want. I'm just curious. The reason I wanted to ask about this is where do you see the spillover in other roles? Dev is obviously the first to go because it's so expensive to hire developers. But
I mean, I
any
think
other
you see
role?
it everywhere.
Yeah.
But before AI became a big thing, I dived quite a bit into it. And what we were predicting were things like, okay, the manual labor will exist until we have proper robotics. We will have more this craft kind of thing, music, art, and
Oh,
then coding. These are the ones that remain were the theories. But then quickly, coding first to go, design, copywriting, video production, second to go. And I was like, damn, completely opposite of what we initially expected. And now it does translate to all the different positions. You name it. Think about sales executive, right? Lead generation. Okay, you can automate and do a half decent job with AI. Same with marketing, with content creation, in consulting, lots of the analyst and the research assistant, not that needed anymore. It is all changing very rapidly.
okay. Okay. So last question before we open up the floor. Should a early stage founder hire an agent before they hire the first employee? Or get an agent?
That I'm a bit of a broken record with all the questions. My answer typically is it depends. It depends on many, many factors. But would it make sense to explore it at the very least so you know what's out there, how it works, and then can also assess if the candidate is on top of it? I think that is the right thing to do. But I've also seen founders then going super deep in learning all these AI tools, automating the workflows themselves to then get some half-baked stuff out of it. And like, okay, great. Now you wasted a month. You still don't have the person. You still didn't get to the results. And all your other work has been halted because you haven't focused on these AI automations. So there is a fine balance between the two, I suppose.
Fair enough. That's cool. I would add to that though, if you have a startup that deals with any kind of developer group, if you don't have a coding agent, I think you're missing out. But that's my personal opinion. Thanks, Billy. I have many more questions, but I want to open up the floor to our audience. I think we've covered a number of subject areas here that we could dive deeper into, and also have more questions that we could throw in the mix. But I'm curious to ask our audience, now that you've been listening to us speak for around 40 minutes here, has there been anything that has come up to you as you've been listening to this? Are there any questions that you're burning about? You have now the unique opportunity to ask a startup recruitment specialist about the latest hacks and hires. So please, if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to raise them now. If not, we'll dive into some of the other questions I have. So feel free to raise your hand, type it in the chat. You're very welcome. I am curious as to how many in the audience here, for example, have done their first hires, or maybe even are going through their first fires, because that's a subject we haven't touched upon really. So while we wait for questions to come up, maybe you can share a little bit on that, Billy, because it's something that I've been thinking like, hiring is obviously the almost the fun part. What can you share about firing for early stage startups? When do you realize that it's necessary to let go of your employees?
As soon as possible, ideally. I mean, it's a tough one. It's a very tough one. Because sometimes the candidates just need a little bit of time to get up to speed. I had situations where firing fast wouldn't have been the best solution, and they did very well in waiting for the 1 month onboarding. And oh wow, all of a sudden they got up to speed and start doing an incredible job. But in general, I would say like, okay, make sure you have set fair and clear expectations, communicated those in a manner that the candidate understands and that you can both keep track of. Then when the delivery is not there, have very transparent conversations like, hey, are the expectations too high? Why is it that you're not delivering the results that we set out to do? And if there's then consistently no delivery and there are no quick fixes you can do, then the conclusion is it's not the right person for the job. And then be transparent and respectful about it, but fire fast and move on, get a person that can do the job.
Okay. Yeah, because it's expensive, right? I mean, other than paying a salary, you have time with a person who's obviously not gonna work in the company. So take me, I've fired. It's not something I enjoy, but it's something I see very necessary in order for any founder, any company to survive. Back in 2020, I had to fire 8 people in one day because of the pandemic suddenly kicking in, and we just didn't have the revenue that we could experience. And I remember sitting at the end of that day realizing that I've kind of cut a lot of meaning out of a person's life here, right? And maybe I don't think I was in the right headspace. It was quite direct with me. So I was curious of the advice that you could offer someone into how do you go into a firing situation? What are some things to do? What are the things to don't? Because I think if you're dealing with any kind of startup, you will have to fire people at one point. So what's the survival manual for going through a firing round successfully for a founder?
I mean, again, it very much depends, right? If it is to a situation that is on the candidate, and for example, it is negligence of the candidate, I think it's sometimes good to be very straightforward, almost be a little bit harsh about it. Don't burn any bridges, but make them clear, like, hey, you underperformed. We have addressed it multiple times. It's not getting where it needs to get to. So today, this is where we're ending it. And typically, they have seen it coming from far away. The other situation is where the company is not performing, it's not hitting its targets, or like something like COVID-19 happens, or the war happens, or whatever. And all of a sudden, you must make the painful decision to cut off some people to save your burn rate, to make sure that your company survives. And then again, being honest about it, right? Being honest, being transparent, making them understand your decision-making process. And in these cases, I would go the extra mile for outplacement. So outplacement meaning introducing them to some other companies, writing them a recommendation on the LinkedIn, endorsing some skills, maybe making a LinkedIn post like, hey guys, we are doing layoffs because of the tough situation. However, we have incredible people. If you are hiring, I would highly recommend them. And basically doing the extra mile to show like, I want you to have a soft landing and I will do everything I can to help you get there.
That's so well said. So just to summarize, so I also remember it. So 2 ways it can go: either they don't perform or the company is not performing. And especially if the company is not performing, do everything you can to leave them in as a good position as possible. And I actually have a fun story to that as well. One of the persons I laid off back then ended up becoming my client. 5 years later. And actually we ended up having a really, really good relationship about it. It took some time. It was tough in the beginning, obviously. But he ended up doing incredibly well for himself, and you found each other. And golden lesson, I think, for any kind of relationship is make sure you leave people with a good impression of you as possible, which is really where the value of a good network also comes into play. This is really good because it's something that many people are either trying to avoid, and then they hold on to the hire for too long and they can't really separate ways, and it costs money and time. And if you don't get to it fast enough, you end up risking so much more. Is there anything in the firing process that you absolutely shouldn't do?
Don't let your emotions get the best of you, regardless of where these emotions come from. Remember, you representing the company, your startup, your whole reputation. Do it respectful, regardless of what happens. Keep the honor to yourself. Do it in the proper way.
Okay. Beautifully said. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to keep going. But again, for the audience, if you have anything in this conversation, I'm also curious if there's anything we haven't asked and spoken to Billy about that you believe is absolutely necessary when it comes to speaking about hiring for your startup, or firing for your startup for that matter. Now's the time to bring it up. But I want to, as we have this conversation going, now you have a bunch of founders here. They are all. We have a question here. What about sales agents, salespeople? I guess that's a very specific type of person. We can extrapolate a little bit about that. Because hiring a salesperson for my last company, which you just helped me with, Billy, was actually a super interesting process, because selling is a very particular personality trait, right? You have to be kind of outgoing. You have to be trustworthy. The question here is, are sales agents performing better than salespeople? So I guess that's a comparison whether you want to hire someone internal or use someone external.
I interpreted the question more like sales agent as in a sales AI agent compared to salespeople. But
actually, that might be true. Go for
But
that.
either way, again, it depends, right? It depends on the quality of the agent, and it depends on the internal people, or depends on the people that you would actually hire. And probably the best is going to be a mix of two. One thing that is with salespeople, though, I have this issue, especially with foreign founders. They assume that Thai sales superstars are the same as Westerners are. And the Westerners are the way that you described it, the smooth talkers, the extroverted, the outgoing ones. But have you noticed that most of the great salespeople in Thailand that overachieve on targets are very much relationship focused? It is the Thai soft power, the kindness. It's built over time. It's more the consultative kind of approach rather than shoving it to the throat and close the deal and get it signed.
I think that's honestly my biggest surprise as well. You don't want someone who comes off as too aggressive in the sales process, depending on the cultural context that you're in. And that often someone, if as a foreign founder, you need to understand that you're not selling a product. If you're selling in Thailand, you're not selling a product to the same people as you would be selling it in the West. And I think that you need to have a cultural check.
Indeed. You want to take these cultural nuances into account when you're making the judgments.
Exactly. Another question from Steven here. Thanks, Steven. You could discuss more generally the internalized hires versus outsource external provision of the company. That's a good point as well. When you realize that you want to not, maybe when do you do outsource? When do you do insourcing?
That's a very good point. And we have these discussions very often, like when I spoke earlier, when we do the intake with clients and we start defining the goals for 90 days, for 30 days, 90 days, 1 year. And we realize, actually, these are a few different hires, or it's not the same person, or actually we could outsource this to an agency or whatever it may be. And maybe you don't need to hire full-time internal then. You can work with an external provider. But the moment that the conclusion is like, okay, we need this key hire for our organizational chart, we will have work for this person the whole year too, then fair enough, right? The exact same reason why later stage startups often have internal recruitment teams, but very early stage ones don't have it because they're not recruiting all the time. Whereas, later stage with a few hundred people, they are recruiting all the time. So it makes more sense to get an internal function.
Yeah, I do actually the same recommendations when it comes to hiring. It also depends on the sensitivity of what it is that's being worked with here, right? If you're dealing with long-term standing relationships, for example, having an outsourced agent for these things can be a critical resource to your company that you don't want to necessarily give to someone else. So I always kind of treat it as what is the value of the interaction that is happening between the agent and outsourced agent and and the company itself. Like I would probably do it a lot with if you're not a CEO or marketing expert, that's a softer value that you could do with. But if you're doing valuable contracts, long-term contracts, account management, for example, that's probably better to have on the inside.
Yeah, fully agree. Fully agree. I think it really depends on are you going to have enough full-time work for this person? And if so, it probably makes more sense to do it internal, because outsourcing, well, they're always going to be charging a margin on top of it. So for quick wins or for part-time kind of roles, it may make a lot of sense. But the moment you have the full-time capacity and they are a critical component to your business, hire internally.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We have 6 minutes left on the clock. We always cut these off in due time, but I have a big request that I think you should give to the founders in the call here, Billy, and that is if you could teach every founder an ability or a technique or a practice when going into the next hiring, maybe not a hiring interview, but just a hiring decision to hire. What is that skill that you would like to, or practice that you'd like them to incorporate?
One skill that they should incorporate when they are going to make the first hires.
Yes, the first going into the first hiring decision.
I would say very much clarity on what you're looking for, clarity from a skill and experience perspective, but also from an attitude perspective. For example, two things that I always look for are curiosity and optimism. Because curious people, they want to get exposed to a variety of things. They love these kind of challenges and diving headfirst into new things. And the same time with optimism, when everything is falling apart and you're firefighting while you're building the company, you don't need negative people. You need people that are a bit optimistic, that focus on the solution instead of constantly nagging about the problems, and that bring the right energy to the office.
That's strong. That's strong. So look a bit inside, perhaps, rather than outside of who you're looking for. So what is the type of company you want to build? Can you convey this in a compelling manner? Do you have a feel for what the immediate urgencies are about your problems and opportunities on a 12-month basis of the company? I think all of these, even as an investor, I want to know these things, right? Because it gives me the ability to see if this founder feels his own company. And
Right.
And that allows at least me to understand that they have a good understanding of where they want to go and where they are. One more question to this. If you're someone looking to be hired by a startup, what is one practice or key consideration you would advise someone looking to work with a startup that they should bring into an interview process or an hiring process with a startup?
Yeah, know what kind of situation you're getting yourself into and express excitement for that. Like, yeah, I love the chaos. I love to build structure when things are unstructured. I love building from scratch, getting a vague goal and figuring out my way out to get there. The moment that it is a bit too corporate-ish, oh, how many holidays do I get? Or can I work from home more days? Like, it's like, what? I think you're focused on the wrong things. Think about what is the value that they want me to add and how can I position myself accordingly that I am the right person for this job. And the beauty is many of these startups, once again, they don't care too much about your actual experience, the skills that you bring to the table. They believe that the right person can learn a lot of these things, but you must bring the right attitude. And that is that entrepreneurial attitude, sense of ownership, result oriented, curious and optimistic. These different things come into play.
Okay. So I want to put you on the spot here as the last follow-up question to that, because in any interview process that I've been in, one question I always ask the person who's being hired is, do you have any question for me? And it's the last one I ask. What should I answer if I'm being interviewed?
Yeah, I mean, it depends first and foremost what's already discussed. But as a candidate, I would also want to know, like, hey, what's the team structure looking like? Who will I be going to reporting to? What are the goals that we are having? Like, what do you expect? What are you going to define as success in 1 year from now? What makes you look back to me as a hire that you're like, wow, I'm so happy I hired this person? These kind of questions that kind of help you position, am I indeed the right person for this job? I think these are the questions that you want to ask. What you don't want to do is focus on benefits or focus on other things. Like that can come later. I understand it's important, right? Everybody wants to get paid and well taken care of. But if that is your focus during the questions, I'm immediately assuming that that is your one and only motivation. And the moment somebody offers more, you're gone. So with that, I'm going to reject you.
Fair, fair. So to bring this all together, it seems like for a founder and a company to hire right, they have to have an extended curiosity, both in the company, but also in the candidate. And for a candidate to be hired correctly by a company, they have to have an extended curiosity in the company and their own role in it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, okay. I guess we come back to the old saying that curiosity is really key. It's such an easy thing to say, right? But I think from what I've also experienced is that the continuous engagement into thinking about what this company is and what it can be, and thinking about what I am in this company and what I could do, is really a process for growth. And I think when you grow a company, you can get very narrow-minded into the specific task, and this is the product and this is the run rate. But sometimes you got to take that step back and see the bigger picture and really ask yourself some of these deeper questions about whether or not we're going the right way, whether or not I see the immediate challenges as being the one. And this is really the synergy that happens between candidate and company and as a whole.
100%. And from both sides, right? You're judging like, okay, can you actually do the job? Are you willing to do the job? Do you have the right drive? And are you the right fit? Meaning, can you actually survive in the environment and the pace that we are on? And if the answer to any of these is no or maybe, just reject and move on to the next one.
Celavi.
This applies both sides, candidate, company.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Well, I mean, Billy, I could speak for you for a much longer time. Actually, a lot of these subjects we never talk about when we meet. It's very, very interesting to hear your perspective on it. But we are at time, and as you know, time is the most valuable resource we have. And I don't want to waste, especially for our audience. Any final words, any final messages to our audience before I let you all go?
Yes, a quick one. We have, let me quickly share my screen. Our next event coming up on the 7th of May. So during the Songkran period, we're going to wish everyone an incredible holiday. But then on the 7th of May, we are back together with an incredible panel on capital and chaos and how startups navigate on certain markets. There's so much things going on in the world at the moment. Wars, geopolitical tension, rising interest rates. How to navigate it? Where are the opportunities? How are different kind of investors looking at it? And how to, well, again, navigate these uncertain times. So that will be the first one. Join us on the 7th of May at the Great Room in Gaison Tower. And the second one, if you want to connect with BSA, we have our website, Instagram, Line Open Chat, and Line Official account. So do join us if you're interested in staying in touch. And then lastly, for those that have a little minute, I just dropped the feedback form here in the chat, just to get a bit of feedback on what we can do better next time, what you would like the future webinars to be like, and so forth. So anyone that has a minute time, please fill it in. It would help us greatly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. And I'll see you soon, Billy. And hope to see the audience in person at our next events. This is something I've been looking very much forward to. And really, the only thing to say is if you're not making the best out of this crisis that's happening globally with your competitive strategy and your startup, I think you're missing out on an amazing growth opportunity. It's not to say that war is good, but it is to say that the strongest is the ones who are able to adapt to the circumstances of our environment. So more on that later. Billy, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Have a nice Songkran, and I'll speak to you soon.
Have a wonderful Songkran.